Tuesday, August 18th, 2020. I'm Greg Nibbler, and this is Digital Trends Live. Well, hello everyone. This is Digital Trends Live, and like I said, I'm Greg Nibbler. Thanks for joining us wherever you are. We appreciate it. We broadcast live here every single weekday, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern, bringing you trending tech headlines, news, interviews, discussions, and more. And let's get started with some news here to start the show off. The App Store war is heating up even more, as Apple is now threatening to remove the developer account of Fortnite creator Epic Games. So this is the latest move from Apple, which was revealed in a lawsuit that Epic Games has filed against the company. So to recap, Epic Games made a move against app stores for both Apple and Google by selling in-game currency for Fortnite at a lower price through their app if users skipped buying it through the app stores. This is in direct violation of both app stores' policies, since they must approve anything being sold, and coincidentally, they also take a 30% cut of that revenue, which is what Epic is protesting against. Now, Fortnite is currently banned from both stores for any new downloads, but the threat to ban Epic's developer account could have much further reaching implications because of the tech that Epic provides other game makers with their Unreal Engine software. So this could have a huge revenue source and possibly end up in the removal of other games and game makers that use the software, depending on how far this spirals. Epic is asking a federal court to block the move to suspend the developer account and asking that Fortnite be reinstated by August 28th, saying that while the lawsuit is still working through the courts, that Apple shouldn't be able to block their apps. Epic is also seeking a coalition, with reports that they have approached Spotify and Sonos at least to join them in a public stance against the company, since both of them have also been very critical of Apple's policies. So far, we don't have any word that these other companies have officially joined on in any way, but this is clearly far from over. You can read more about it at digitaltrends.com, and for an in-depth analysis, check out our podcast, Trends with Benefits. A recently released document that was obtained by Motherboard shows that the Secret Service purchased phone location data from a third party, which would allow them to skip the need for a warrant to track someone. So here's what happened. There is a social media surveillance company from Virginia called Babel Street. Now, Babel Street has been in the news over the last few years for selling surveillance subscriptions to all kinds of organizations, including law enforcement like the Chicago PD and the FBI, but also to private organizations like the Carolina Panthers, of all teams. Their software allows for precise filtering of social media information gathered from a number of sites, including hashtags, handles, names, and even apparently implied sentiment in user posts. Now, they also have a program called Locate X, which compiles anonymous phone data. And this is what the Secret Service purchased a subscription to. So all of our phones put out anonymous pings showing location as they ping a cell tower. This is anonymous because it doesn't contain user data. But if one were to obtain a map of pings in a certain area at a certain time, and they were to follow those pings of those devices as they left an area, say until they got home, then all of a sudden that phone's data isn't anonymous anymore because you've got an address and probably a name to go with it. Usually this kind of thing would require law enforcement to get a warrant, but if they can buy it on the third market, reportedly for around $36,000 in 2017, then they can get around it. Senator Ron Wyden is also drafting legislation to prevent law enforcement agencies from circumventing the court like this, but nonetheless, it's clear it's been happening, and we'll have to see what else is revealed. Read more about this at digitaltrends.com. The ongoing issue of Uber and Lyft in California may result in them actually turning part of their operations into franchises, according to a report from the New York Times. So the AB5 law, which went into effect in January in California, stipulates that Uber, Lyft, and other gig economy companies classify their workers as employees instead of contractors, which would essentially force them to provide minimum wage, some kinds of benefits, time off, and all the other things that a standard employee would be entitled to. Now, Uber and Lyft have used various defenses against the bill, stating that the drivers want the freedom to work when they want, and using the argument that the companies themselves are merely tech providers. To that end, they've apparently been looking at scenarios in which they could license their software, basically meaning use of the apps, to fleet operators who would then in turn be responsible for their drivers. So it's something they already do in Germany, where laws have already required them to operate like that to some extent, but in the US, it could lead to some unintended consequences. It may satisfy the AB5 statute, but there also aren't a lot of fleet operators that are big enough left, like say, taxi services, which they largely put out of business to some extent, that can handle that amount of riders. So it also probably mean fare increases for everyone, more third-party regulation of drivers, which is a big concern because that's a little bit less regulation, or it's depending on other people. That's a big concern. Franchising is just one possibility, though, that they could go for. They may simply leave California altogether, as they've threatened. So it's definitely a rapidly evolving story. Read more about it at digitaltrends.com. All right, some updates are on the way for Tesla owners, according to Elon Musk, and they include goat sounds. So more on that in a minute. As per typical Elon Musk fashion, he took to Twitter a couple of days ago to answer questions and make some announcements about software updates for Tesla owners. One of the updates touted was for pothole detection. Essentially, what this would allow the vehicle to do is automatically detect when it's on a bad road and react to that, so it could slow down or steer around holes or bumps when needed. Then there's the addition of two-factor authentication for access to the vehicles themselves. That's an important one. With Teslas, you can unlock the car, start the car, and even summon the car in certain situations through the app. So two-factor authentication is a good thing for that. He said it's going through final validation right now. And getting back to this, there is the goat horn. So Teslas do have various sounds you can make for the inside of the car, but according to Musk, they only recently got an outside speaker. So newer vehicles, they can send updates to create sounds and unique horns for them, one of which will apparently be the sound of goats. This will also help them comply with future laws for electric vehicles, which would require them to emit sound since they're so quiet. And he stated that one of those could be the coconut sound from Monty Python, so that could be on the way as well. Either way, a goat horn will definitely get your attention. You can read more about it at digitaltrends.com. All right, something that has all of our attention right now is what is happening with the economy and what we should be doing with our money. How do we handle our finances? And as usual, we have our guest, Winnie Sun, joining us here now to talk about this. Winnie, always good to see you. And I feel like something that we start off with every week is the stimulus package. What do we think is going to happen, and when do we expect anything to actually go through?
Well, Greg, the stimulus package is on everybody's mind, and so we are waiting to see when Congress is going to get back from their recess so they can make a decision, come together, and finally give us an enlightenment, if you will, on when we're going to get that next round of stimulus funding. But we do know some Americans who actually are owed some money from the first round for their dependents. They actually should be receiving that check in August this month.
So is that the $500 stimulus check, or is that something else completely different?
That is a $500 check. They were due that earlier, but there was a delay. And so a lot of Americans actually didn't receive that $500 check for their dependents under the age of 17. So we're really waiting to see. We know the president already signed the 4 executive orders indicating that some funding was going to be made available to Americans. But unfortunately, it's really sort of in limbo because Congress does hold the purse strings to be able to issue out more funding to Americans.
Something else that I know, a lot of people are looking at with investors talking about the stock market and kind of looking at what's happening in the stock market versus what the economy is actually doing. And I guess to kind of sum that up for everybody, should investors be concerned? Should we be investing or holding back?
So that is the big question, Greg. Everybody's been asking, should I continue to invest? Am I missing out? And, we want to look at the stock market as a whole. Even before the pandemic, the stock market's been on a raise since 2008. We know that today, in fact, the S&P 500 broke a new high. So even if we didn't have the pandemic to talk about, I think many of us would agree that the market's been doing well for a very long time. So taking opportunity right now to take some profit from your portfolio, maybe reassessing, maybe holding a little bit more cash, and really making sure that your investment portfolio is aligned to your risk tolerance and your time horizon right now makes a lot of sense. So I would consider gearing on the side of caution and really taking advantage of the market doing well and taking some profit.
Great advice. So certainly something to look at going there. Another thing that I know is on the minds of a lot of people is that their kids are going back to school. Certainly a unique situation, no matter where you are, how that's going to play out. But with that, for the parents out there, what should they be spending money on, and where should they be putting their money towards, given the current situation?
Yes, Greg, we know actually back to school shopping is all the rage right now. And back to school shopping traditionally is the second largest shopping affair of the year outside of the holidays. And so typically parents are spending a lot of money on new outfits, on technology, on school supplies. But this year, I would suggest most parents really be mindful on just spending what they need currently. And a lot of parents are saying, well, since my kids are distance learning, I'm thinking about getting them a new tablet or a new laptop. And I actually would suggest that you hold off on that right now. It's a big purchase. In addition, many schools and districts are providing your students with these resources. And we know that technology changes so rapidly, and you might find better value closer to the end of the year or even later as we're beyond the pandemic. Then you can assess whether or not and what type of technology is best suitable for your child. But right now, it's great to keep really tight on your budget just in case things change and your children, their education situation changes. Your financial needs might be derailed, if you will, if things get extended.
Something else that I know a lot of people, me, have thought about is it a good time to refinance still? Because I know with the rates kind of in fluctuation and being down, is this a good time to look at that, or are there some maybe pitfalls that people aren't noticing with that?
So, Greg, yeah, everybody's been looking at the mortgage rates recently, and they have been very attractive. But what happened, unfortunately, was a week ago, there was an announcement by Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac saying that consumers who are in the process of refinancing, they would be okay. But if you haven't submitted for a refinance yet, that your rate was actually going to increase by 0.5% on the amount that you're going to borrow. So for most Americans, that's going to average about $1,500 more in cost if you refinance today and beyond versus if you had refinanced a couple weeks ago. And unfortunately, outside of Freddie and Fannie, all the other lenders sort of joined and increased their rates as well because they were concerned they're not making as much on these refinances. However, that being said, if you are sitting on a mortgage right now that is in excess of 4%, I would highly recommend looking and comparing refinancing options, because if you're holding onto your home long term and you've got plenty of time to pay this mortgage, it might still make sense just to get that rate down and save a few $100s per month.
Nice. Great advice. So one other thing I want to bring up here too is just to tell everybody about, you have a new course that you have started on LinkedIn, and I wonder if you could tell everybody about that and what they can gain from that.
Oh, great. Thank you so much for mentioning that. So I just launched a brand new course with LinkedIn Learning. You can go on LinkedIn Learning platform now, and it's called Managing Your Finances During a Financial Downturn. So it's really designed for what we're going through right now. And the lessons that you go through are going to carry you forward. And as we get beyond the pandemic, they are sort of the financial principles that I think everyone should know about.
I love it. Well, Winnie, as always, so good to have you on here to help make sense of all of this and make it understandable for a lot of us who may not have this in-depth knowledge that you've got. Appreciate it so much, and we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Greg. Take care.
Winnie Sun right here, always such great advice. I love those segments with her. All right, continuing on here with the show, we've got some great guests that are going to be joining us here on Digital Trends Live. As always, coming up next, we've got Carlos Watson, who's the co-founder and CEO of OZY Media, talking about all kinds of things that OZY Media is doing and his new show in particular that just launched recently. So we're going to cover all of that and more. Stick around, back here in a minute with more Digital Trends Live. Welcome back to Digital Trends Live. I'm Greg Nibbler. Thanks for joining us. Hit that subscribe button and join the show here every single weekday. Now, our next guest is the founder and CEO of the OZY Media Company, which produces TV shows, festivals, podcasts, digital news, and features. And he's also the host of the appropriately named The Carlos Show. It's Carlos Watson. Hello, sir. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, my pleasure, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Carlos, I want to talk to you about a lot of things, but I want to start off just talking about OZY Media in general and what makes it, maybe you can tell us what makes it such a unique company and voice in this current media landscape.
Yeah, Greg, it's funny. I spent the first part of my career in business. I worked at McKinsey. I helped start an education company with my sister and good friend. And then I made kind of a left-hand turn and got into television. And I started hosting shows at CNBC, CNN, MSNBC. And I realized 5 or 6 years ago that as much as I love news and media, that we needed something different. I wanted a voice that was more forward-looking, that was more global, that was more colorful. I wanted the kinds of people who would introduce me to Trevor Noah before he was the host of The Daily Show, or a bartender before she was AOC. And so that's what we built in OZY. And today, while some people got used to us as a newsletter, today, as you said, we've got about a dozen TV shows. We've got nearly a half dozen podcasts, and we've got, I think, the best festival out there, OZY Fest, which you can find in Central Park in New York or in Golden Gate Park coming next year.
Well, something else that you just recently launched is The Carlos Show. And you mentioned you've hosted a lot of other shows previously, but what's different about this and how are you kind of changing up the talk show format with this?
Yeah, given everything that happened with George Floyd and all the related conversations, I felt like in many ways our country is at a tipping point. Maybe arguably the globe is at a tipping point. And I don't just mean on questions of race, but I mean when it comes to technology, demographics, our politics, and that there really was a need for a different kind of show that would bring more voices to the table, not just the usual suspects, but maybe some people you don't quite know yet, up and comers. Karen Bass, for example, who nearly was the VP nod, was our first choice long before she was a headline name. But I also wanted the kind of place where you actually would have an extended conversation and not just a static interview. And so it's a half-hour show. It's daily. Everyone from Maggie Siff on Billions to Malcolm Gladwell, everyone from your girl Tommy Lahren to someone like Mark Cuban, all are stopping by the Carlos Watson Show on YouTube.
That's an interesting mix of people to hear a lot of different viewpoints, I would imagine, with that.
Yeah.
Something else I want to ask you, you brought up George Floyd and, with the Black Lives Matter protests that are going on and the need for so many different social reforms that are happening in this country, how do you see the role of journalism as a whole and maybe your role in particular in meeting that moment and speaking to society about these changes?
Yeah, Greg, it's funny. I've always felt like if you could change the way people see the world, you might also be able to change the way in which they can live in the world. And so the more people have a sense of possibility, a sense of there are different ways to accomplish things and not just one way, maybe there's more room for collaboration. Maybe people think about voting differently. Maybe they love differently. Maybe they relate to their family, parents, children differently. And so part of my hope with OZY is that we can help you see the world more broadly. And clearly, I think that was critical in the George Floyd case. There were so many pieces to it, not just that it happened, but that it wasn't the first. And sadly, it hasn't been the last. The fact that for some people, this was a surprise, as opposed to for many of us, it was something that sadly we felt like we had witnessed happen more than once. And so I do hope OZY can be an eye-opener. I hope we can help people get outside their bubble, but in a really good and valuable way in which people can learn, they can enjoy themselves, and maybe sometimes be provoked and challenged.
Looking at OZY from a media company standpoint, of what you do, the business of media and providing news, we take a look at social media and just how many issues are going on with that, as far as conspiracy theories and misinformation. Yet it is one of the major ways that media companies get their information out there. So from that standpoint, do you feel that social media should take a more active role in moderating content on their platforms to make sure the information is factual?
Yeah, I think unequivocally, and obviously you see Zuckerberg and Jack Dorsey and ultimately others moving in that way. I mean, we know that it can influence elections, and elections matter, right? It can influence policy, but it can also influence culture. It can influence how people think about each other, what we think is okay, how it, is it okay for me to shout at you, to spit at you? What happens if we're neighbors and we disagree? And so I do think it's important that that our major organs of conversation are civil and open, and that's not always easy. So I won't pretend like it's a simple thing, but I think it's important work, and I think they've got a responsibility.
Going back to these different interviews that you've had, and all these different people that you've been able to speak to, different voices. Like right now, if you could sit down with any one person and have a conversation, maybe it's for the Carlos show or just to even discuss a topic, who would that be?
You're saying besides yourself?
Besides me. I will absolutely
you.
take that.
You're talking about the runner-up. You're talking about the silver medalist. It'd
Thank
probably
you.
be your
I
boy.
appreciate it.
Probably be your boy Vladimir Putin. Look, I think this is a big world, but it's a small world, right? And Greg, you and I know that a lot about our world is influenced by what happens in China, by what happens in Europe, by what happens in Nigeria, but also what happens in Russia. And very few people have as big a say in how you and I live our lives, even if we don't think about it that way, than Putin. And I certainly would love to sit down with him. I'd love to sit down with your girl Lizzo on a different end of the spectrum. Here's someone with a beautiful voice who's broken through in a really fresh and unusual way. Someone who was homeless, living in her car for a while, so knows the struggle game. Spent a lot of time in both Minneapolis and Houston, two places that have kind of been flashpoints of the recent social conversation and social uprising. And so, if I were going to put two people together, I'd put those two and see what we came up with.
I think that answer perfectly encapsulates kind of what you're going for with the Carlos show as far as getting all these different voices. Never ever heard Vladimir Putin and Lizzo in the same sentence for interviews. And I think both would be fascinating. For the Carlos show, what's coming up next? What should people look forward to, or what do you want to let them know about what's on the docket?
Yeah, I think we're going to have a collection of some of the most important and interesting voices that you need to hear, especially in the run-up to the election. So Malcolm Gladwell stops by. So does your girl, Tomi Lahren. You'll hear from Roxane Gay, but you'll also see athletes like Baker Mayfield and Bubba Wallace. So we've got a lot of good stuff coming. One of the folks to keep your eye on a little bit, who I wasn't aware of before, but he's going to be a big star. And Greg, I want you to say that you heard it here first. There's a former middle school principal out of the Bronx, a guy named Jamal Bowman. Remember that name, and about a year or two from now, you and I are going to get together, and you're going to be like, "Oh, I thought you were just talking," but it turned out that that guy's the real deal. Keep your eye on him. I think one of the special things I hope about the Carlos Watson show is that not only will we give you the people who you know, but we'll give you the people who you need to know. And I think he's one of those up and comers that I'm going to be proud to have helped introduce to a wider world.
Jamal Bowman. I will remember that name. And yes, let's absolutely have a conversation a year from now and talk about that. Well, Carlos Watson Show, everybody go check that out. Great conversations, and just congratulations on the success of what you're doing and bringing these different voices to the forefront and these conversations that you're having. I really appreciate that. I think it's a very important thing right now. And I appreciate you taking some time to join us here too on Digital Trends Live.
Hey, Greg, you're super kind, and I appreciate you having me, and I love what you guys do there. And so please keep it up, and thank you for letting me be a small part of it.
We will, absolutely. Thank you very much. Carlos Watson joining us right here on Digital Trends Live, the Carlos Watson Show. Check that out, everything that he's doing there. Very interesting stuff and important. All right, let's do this. We got to take a break because we've got more guests coming up. Up next, we've got our Who's Got Game segment, where we partner with Fullscreen to bring on incredible talent, and that is what we're going to be having next. So I appreciate everybody who joins the show here. We've got Mike Rashid, who's going to be on next to talk about everything that he's got going, so stick around. Back here in a minute with more Digital Trends Live. Welcome back to Digital Trends Live. I'm Greg Nibbler, and again, thanks for joining us wherever you are. We appreciate it. Hit that subscribe button because you get to hear from really amazing people, and that's what we're going to do right now. It's time for Who's Got Game, where we partner with Fullscreen to bring on incredibly talented people, and that is who we have joining us. We've got Mike Rashid. Mike, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me.
So one thing we always like to do with these segments and talking to people who are creators like you is how you got your start. What made you decide to go into this field to begin with?
It's funny because I never decided to go into this. It just kind of engulfed me. Years ago, I say around 2000, I was doing personal training independently in around 2010, 2011. And in 2012, I believe Instagram was the first thing to really kick off, but I had a Facebook page, I had a YouTube page, but I was just using it to kind of show my clients progress. And I thought showing video of their progress was a lot cooler than just showing a before and after picture. So people were liking it, and I was getting more clients, more business because of the stuff that I was showing. And then every now and then I would post myself doing some of my crazy over the top workouts. And people just really liked it. And then the content started getting, becoming viral, and, you know, the following grew and grew. And I had no idea that this was going to become a big thing. And so it happened very, I guess, by accident. It wasn't an articulated plan for me to build a brand and grow my personal brand and these things, because that's what you have now. People are, you know, going in with the intent of building a specific brand for social media, you know, to have a career and whatnot. And I never tried to do that. It just kind of happened. And I just try to keep up with it and stay ahead of it.
Well, looking at it from the fitness standpoint, you know, and you being the expert and people going to you for advice, what is one thing that you think people overlook the most when it comes to fitness?
What do they overlook? When you ask that question, I mean, let's identify the problem so I can really understand the context. Overlook in terms of what? People not doing it right? People not being consistent? Like what?
Let's take it to a broader, I guess, standpoint. So thinking about it from the standpoint of a lot of people are looking to try to get in shape, but gyms are closed right now. And so they're trying to figure out, to some extent, you know, they're trying to figure out what they could do. What's one big thing that they should maybe pay attention to if somebody's just starting to get into a fitness routine? What's one piece of advice you'd have for them?
To try their best to make it a lifestyle, just to incorporate it in their everyday thing, make it a thing. Because with me, before COVID happened and things got closed, I was already running a challenge, a 30-day challenge. I've been doing this for about 3 years. And my intent with the challenge was for people who don't have access to the gym or are not comfortable going to the gym and showing creative ways and fun ways, challenging ways to work out and get in shape. I'm talking about really good shape by optimizing their nutrition and finding things to do at home or in the park or things of that nature. So I've been doing this challenge for a few years with all body weight stuff. No gym required, no equipment required, and people love it. So I think and I'm able to do that because I've done that for years. This is like my life. I've always been in shape. I've always been active and physically fit. So I feel like when people really embrace it fully and totally, they will get comfortable and even just think of creative ways to work out without having a gym. I provide that for people who don't have that, who don't know what to do, or, you know, they just lost. A lot of people are lost right now because they don't have access to the gym. And I understand it, I get it, but you don't need the gym. That's just one way. There's so many ways to skin a cat. We can't allow the fact that businesses are closed or gyms are closed impede our physical fitness and our health, because listen, this is the most valuable asset we got is our bodies and our health. If we're not healthy, we're not good for anybody in our lives, you know?
One thing you brought up there was nutrition, and talking about that aspect of things. Now, for a lot of people during the pandemic, they started trying out different things, cooking more at home. For you personally, is there anything that you changed with your eating habits during this?
During the pandemic, no. I had changed my nutrition for a couple months in March, April, a little bit of May, but it wasn't because of the pandemic. It was because I had an injury. I'm a professional boxer as well, and I was preparing for a fight in March, and I actually tore a tendon in my left arm that connects the bicep to the forearm. So I had surgery, and then for the recovery, to help speed that up, nutrition does come into play. So I went on an anti-inflammatory diet, high nutrition. It did have me eating more than I typically eat, but it did help me recover a lot faster than I would have recovered just by, just keeping everything the same. But my typical protocol of eating, is not common, but I eat one meal a day. So it is a form of intermittent fasting, but I just choose to eat one big meal a day.
Well, you brought up the boxing aspect, and I guess I kind of have a two-part question. One, I guess, why did you want to turn pro originally? Because I know that you boxed when when you were an amateur. I think you have a couple of gold gloves, if I remember that right. And then you decided to go pro with this. What was it that made you want to turn pro into boxing?
Yeah, man, I absolutely love the sport of boxing. It's a science, right? It's an art. It's so mental, and it's so difficult to do. But once you are in there and you're doing it, it's so rewarding. So it really bothered me that I never turned pro, So what my life is now, I can kind of, I'm fortunate enough to be able to focus on certain things that really make me happy. So I said, you know what, I'm gonna turn pro. And it was also very, very challenging for me, and I need those challenges. I'm the type of person that I need gut checks in my life, because I just never want to, life can be hard sometimes, right? But when you learn lessons, you apply what you've learned, life becomes a lot easier. And I notice my life gets easier over time, because I'm a student of life. And so I was like, what? I don't want to get soft, mentally. So I got to stay sharp. So I stay sharp by giving myself gut checks and doing things that I know are hard to do. So I feel like that helps me level up and grow. So that was a reason why I did it as well. But I just didn't want to close the book of my life without have becoming a professional boxer, because boxing honestly is one of the things I just love. I love it to death. So I'm very happy that I stuck with my plan and executed it.
I like it. That's almost like it's avoiding a future regret if you hadn't gone into that.
Correct.
One thing I do want to I want to ask you, just along the lines of boxing, and I want to thank you for being here with us. But coming up soon, Mike Tyson's getting back in the ring. Roy Jones Jr. is getting back in the ring. Who do you think's going to win that fight?
Man, don't ask me that question. I don't know. I'm not going to pick anybody. I'm just going to sit back and enjoy the show and just watch it as a fan. I love both of those guys. Both of those guys were huge inspirations to me when I was growing up and coming up. They both are so iconic in the sport. Mike Tyson transcends sports and transcends time periods of just cultural. His cultural presence spans from the 80s to now, and is still very prevalent and popular and cool and inspiring. So listen, I'm just going to enjoy the show, but I want to know, who do you think is going to win? Who you got?
If Roy Jones Jr. is still quick enough, I think he's got a shot. But if Mike Tyson, I've seen those videos of him, if he can land a couple of those blows, I don't know how anybody could stand up to that, even as old as he is.
Right, I agree. The man still got it. Both of them still got it. The thing is, Mike has been inactive for a long time. I did a podcast with him, a few months ago, and it's so interesting because he was like, I don't want to box ever again. I don't even like working out no more. So to see him switch it up, just so all of a sudden, it just makes me worry that I don't know if he's going to be in shape like Roy's going to be in shape, because Roy just stopped fighting 2 years ago, and he's very active because he's training a lot of guys and he gets in there and spars with them. So we shall see.
Yeah.
We shall see.
I think the bottom line is it's going to be an interesting fight. I definitely want to watch it. But Mike, I want to thank you. for joining us. I want to encourage everybody to check out your channel, check out everything that you're doing, staying in shape, and thanks for being here with us, to talk about what you do and sharing that with us here on Digital Trends Live. Really, really appreciate it.
For sure. I appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure.
You bet. Mike, right here, Mike Rashid on Digital Trends Live. So very interesting seeing how creators create and what's the inspiration behind what they do. And that's what we talk about with that segment. And I want to thank everybody for joining us here on Digital Trends Live. We are here every single weekday, 9 a.m. Pacific, noon Eastern. So hit that subscribe button to join the show. We will always have the news for you ready to go. And we've always got some great guests that join us here every single day. And so that's why we appreciate you being a part of it. Share the show. Let other people know about it. Favorite segment, retweet it. Do all that stuff. It's always great. All right. Thank you, everybody, for being here with us. I'm Greg Nibbler. I'll see you right back here tomorrow with another edition of Digital Trends Live.